Tonight in the trial of Oscar Pistorius, a defence expert challenges the prosecution.
It is thus speculative to attempt to estimate when the late Ms. Steenkamp's food intake occurred.
And a surprise witness describes Oscar Pistorius' state 24 hours after he killed his girlfriend.
I saw a heartbroken man that's suffering emotionally.
First to give evidence, Professor Lundgren, who chose to retain her anonymity.
Professor, you still under oath?
The expert witness, an anaesthetist, was called by Oscar Pistorius' defence team in the hope that she could support the athlete's contention that he and Reeva Steenkamp had eaten together 8 hours before she was fatally shot.
The anaesthetic literature has not been able to prove that there is no solid food in the stomach after 4 hours.
Professor Lundgren began by explaining to the court that there were many determining factors. Trying to predict how long food remained in the stomach was not an exact science.
There are many neurological, emotional and hormone interactions, my lady, that may delay gastric emptying. Pain and anxiety in particular. It's been thought in very recently that premenopausal women, depending on at what stage of the cycle they're in, may have delayed gastric emptying. Sleep delays gastric emptying. That's an accepted fact.
The timeline of events the night the model was shot dead is important. The prosecution maintains Oscar Pistorius is lying, pointing to an autopsy report that shows Miss Steenkamp's stomach contained food. Experts say a stomach is normally empty 6 hours after eating. If this is true, then Miss Steenkamp ate later on that fateful night, meaning the couple could have been awake and arguing before the shooting.
The evidence that I've been given to read from this court case indicates that the late Reeva Steenkamp ate a chicken stir-fried dinner at approximately 1900 to 2000 hours on the evening of the 13th of February last year. And this is my opinion purely, but are based on my expertise and my reading. Factors that may have affected gastric emptying are as follows. The meal may have contained insoluble fibre, which would have delayed gastric emptying. She was a premenopausal woman, which may have delayed gastric emptying. It is not known whether she was taking any medication, herbal or prescription. She had performed yoga exercises that evening, and exercise does delay gastric emptying, but I'm not sure how energetic that exercise was. So in summary, my lady, the presence of gastric contents after a meal is dependent on the volume and the content of the meal, and a host of other vital factors as I've indicated. It is thus speculative to attempt to estimate when the late Ms. Steenkamp's food intake occurred based purely on the presence of gastric contents.
Listening carefully to the testimony, Prosecutor Harry Nell. He accepted Professor Lundgren's evidence was on the whole balanced, but
in normal individuals, 10% of a low-fat meal usually remains in the stomach after 4 hours. So there is nothing that you've seen that would indicate that we're not dealing with a normal individual in the deceased in this matter.
I'm not sure what you mean by normal
Is there
individual.
anything that why would you say she wasn't a normal individual?
I have no reason to.
Yes, that's a question. So, one would expect that after 4 hours, only 10% of a low-fat meal would remain.
My lady, I feel that this has been taken out of context because my report deals with the timing, content and volume of the patient's oral intake, as well as other factors that may delay gastric emptying. And we know that, well, from the evidence that's available, I'm led to believe that the deceased slept, and there are other factors that may have delayed gastric emptying. So this is just one fact, and I feel it's been taken out of context, my lady.
But in all probability, if anybody would ask you, you would say, in normal individuals, 10% of the stomach content would remain after 4 hours. If you weren't in this court and people would ask you a question, that would be your answer.
Of a low-fat meal?
Yes. That would be your answer, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. What we do have is we have two people that sat down for dinner that were both very health conscious. We have a model, the deceased, and we have a professional sportsman, the accused. So in probability, we would not expect fat, excessive fat in the meal, having dealt with two health conscious people. In probability. You agree with that?
My lady, I don't think that's a question.
Okay. It is a question, but you know what? The record will speak for itself.
Listening to today's evidence, Oscar Pistorius sat impassively, emotion barely registering on his face. But it was very different earlier in the trial when the Paralympian broke down repeatedly in tears during his cross-examination. But this sincerity has been challenged by the prosecution. So a surprise witness was brought forward by the athlete's defence team. They want to prove the Paralympian's emotion is genuine.
From the first time that I saw him, from the first second, was a man that was heartbroken about the loss. He cried, he was in mourning, he suffered emotionally, he was very sorry about the loss, especially for her parents, the suffering they are going through. That was the theme throughout the whole period that I saw him.
Yvette Van Schalkwijk, a social worker, visited Oscar Pistorius in his police cell during his bail application.
He just sat down and started crying, and we had to get him up and calm him down.
It was she who approached the runner's lawyers, wanting to give evidence in his defence because she said she had been upset by the allegation that he was not remorseful.
What is it that you saw as the probation officer?
As I said, I saw a heartbroken man. He cried 80% of the time. He talked to me about what they planned for the future, his future with her, the loss that he never is going to see again, her family, her mother and father, what they are going through. That's what I saw. I saw a heartbroken man that's suffering emotionally.
The prosecutor accepted that Oscar Pistorius could well have been traumatised. He had just shot and killed his girlfriend. But what Harry Nell wanted to know was where was the athlete's apology?
You saw him on the 15th, he killed her on the 14th, and you saw him on the 15th.
That's correct.
And he said he missed her.
Yes. He missed Reva so much. That was his words. The first words that he said to me.
And you said further that but you know, he missed Reva so much. But it's the same man that shot and killed her the day before. Does it make sense?
I can't make any comment on the merit of the case.
Yes.
He said to me he accidentally shot her later on.
Did he discuss himself? How he felt?
I asked him how is he doing. He said he's barely coping. He was crying. But the same theme came over and over about Mrs. Reva. Sorry what happened. Is her parents. It was the same theme throughout. That day was just heartbroken. Confused, I presumed also.
Something I haven't heard is that he said, "I'm so sorry."
He was sorry.
No. He never said that. He never said that, did he?
He said to me he was sorry about what happened, the incident.
No, you would have said that to us. You're now adapting. You're now adapting a version.
We had 5 days where we had a lot of discussions. We spent a lot of time in each other's company.
Just put on record, and I hear she did refer to you being sorry before this question. Maybe Mr. Nell did not hear it.
My lady, may I continue, because it's never the evidence, and we listened to it, that he said, "I'm sorry."
I want to get this straight. What is it that he's...
Before Mr. Nell passed around him saying now for the first time that he was sorry, the evidence before that she did refer to him saying that he was sorry.
The evidence did say he said to her.
Yes.
He
yes,
is
ma'am.
sorry.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
It was not the first time in this question.
Right.
It was,
Thank
came
you.
up before.
Thank you.
He's very sorry about the loss he caused.
About?
About the loss.
Very
But
sorry
not sorry
about...
for what he did.
Oh,
There's a big difference between the two, mate.
yes. Can you
Right.
just
Yes.
make sure
Let
that
me
it's
just make
understood
clear.
that
Did
way?
he ever say he's sorry for what he did?
At that stage in
At
the
that
bail,
stage, madam.
in the bail application, we didn't really talk about the merits of the case. Like I said, he's sorry for the loss, for his loss, for his heartbrokenness. He's sorry for her parents.
You see, he's sorry for his loss. I understand that. That was what I cross-examined him. I'm so sorry I lost you. But he never said, I'm just sorry that I killed her. He never said that to you.
No, my lady.
Yes.
Next, a senior ballistics expert called by the defence says he found a piece of evidence the prosecution missed. The Oscar Pistorius murder trial continued with another defence witness, forensic and ballistics expert Thomas Woolmerans. He described the bullets fired by the athlete and what impact they were likely to have.
The ammunition used in this firearm was Winchester Ranger 127 grade plus B plus, produced primarily for law enforcement and self-defense. The bullet is jacketed hollow point bullet with a perforation designed to expand into sharp edges upon impact.
What does that mean in
My
layman's
lady,
language?
it means that this bullet, it forms like a mushroom. When it hits the soft flesh, the mushrooms, we call it mushroom. So your caliber enlarge, so it makes a bigger wound ballistics, and that after the wound is larger than with, for instance, a full metal jacket where it will, sorry man.
After switching off his phone, Mr. Woolmerans explained why he thought the prosecution could not accurately replicate the trajectory of each bullet, nor the order in which they hit Miss Steenkamp.
It is unlikely that the door would have been reconstructed with absolutely accuracy. Slight deviations from the original position during reconstruction would have had an influence on the accurate determination of bullet trajectories. Variation of 1 millimeter to the position of the muzzle can have an influence on the measured trajectories even over short distances.
Mr. Wolmerans, you deal with possible positions of the deceased behind a toilet door at the time of firing the 4 bullets.
That is correct, my lady. It is not possible to determine with accuracy the sequence of the shots and the body position of the deceased. My lady, it's my opinion that you can't say it with certainty what it is, but it's what a position of the deceased was at the time the shot was fired. According to the pathologist, the effect of the injury would have been that the deceased's right leg became immediately unstable and that she would have been incapable of voluntary movement. She would have started to collapse. There is 2 secondary wounds, also consistent, according to Professor Simon, possibly caused by fragments of wood splinters. And the abrasion or secondary wounds are consistent with being struck by a large wood splinter, dislodged by the passage of the bullet. It is difficult in the instance to determine the proximity from the door due to the clothing that could have prevented injury to the skin caused by wooden splinters. Entrance and exit wounds to the right upper arm on the right anterior chest could be related to entrance wound 4.3A and exit wound 4.3B to the right upper arm. The height of these wounds, wounds 4.4, that's the one I've already mentioned underneath the breast, my lady, and photo 22 indicates 4.4. The height of these wounds 4.4, are 117 centimeters above the right foot.
That brought proceedings to an end. We asked firearms expert Martin Hood and journalist Annika Larsen to assess today's testimony.
What was interesting for me today, probably the most riveting testimony, was really from Yvette van Skalkwyk from Social Services, who was sent to monitor Oscar Pistorius's fragile emotional state during the bail application. Now, this is quite unusual because that's not really the done thing in South Africa. We don't usually, as you probably know, we don't usually send people down to the cells to watch their emotional state. They usually ask the police person to keep an eye on someone if they think they're suicidal. And I can only gather from that they must have been worried that he was going to harm himself in some way.
Very, very interesting, as you say, very unusual. What I find legally interesting about it is the fact that by putting her on the witness stand, they may well have made yet another tactical mistake, because Harry Nell hammered on her about the fact that at no point did it appear that Pistorius had any remorse about what he'd done. And again, Pistorius came across as being very self-centered. So this may have backfired.
Well, exactly, but she also did go into some detail, taking us down into those cells and saying how he kept on saying, I miss Reva so much. I can't believe what's happened. I can't believe what I've done. She didn't use those exact words, but she said at no point, she had to concede that at no point did he actually, if you like, take responsibility,
and he sounded,
which is Nell's point.
And he sounded so self-centered about it, because it's I the whole time. I feel this, I feel that, I miss Reva. Where is the concern, the thought about the families of Reva and friends?
She did, but that was interesting because she did say repeatedly that he kept on worrying about Reva's parents and what impact this was going to have on them, and how terribly concerned and worried he was for them. So I think that what's interesting for me is that no psychological expert has been brought in to tell us how a person's mental state or behavior post a so-called criminal offence, what relevance it has on innocent or presumption of guilt.
It's irrelevant.
It's not relevant.
All the court has to determine was his state of mind at the time that he decided to pull the trigger, whether he did it intentionally with the intent to kill, or whether he did it justifiably in the circumstances. So bringing this evidence afterwards is more evidence about mitigation. And what's interesting
which is for sentencing.
And what's interesting is the judge, I believe, made a comment saying, we may need you later, which may, let me stress, may be an indication that she's going to have to listen to the psychologist after conviction so she can get a sense of how mitigating the circumstances were after the event. So who knows, we may end up seeing her again.
I thought what was also interesting for me was how she was a surprise witness, and she said she'd only come forward because she'd read in a newspaper report that Oscar Pistorius had taken acting lessons, and the defense had vehemently denied this allegation, but she said she wanted to put it on the record that she had been with him in very close proximity and in a very sort of intimate way for 5 days, and at no point did he seem anything but a heartbroken, deeply saddened, and quite wretched, broken individual.
Now, once again, she's a surprise witness. That to me says that the defense doesn't have a plan. We don't see a coherent string of witnesses. We all of a sudden have a psychologist testifying about something post the event as opposed to the event itself or what happened before the event. And I can't help but keep this impression that the defense doesn't have as coherent a plan as they'd like us to believe, because we're not getting the witnesses in a logical order. We're not getting any wow witnesses. We're not getting a witness that walks in like Captain Mangena, for example, and says, this is what I've got to say, that's how I'm saying it, believe me and look me in the face and you know I'm telling the truth. We haven't had any of those wow moments, and I think this is another example of perhaps where they're not really prepared to put their defense forward properly.
Tom Wolmerans was up next, the ballistics expert, and we've been waiting for him for quite some time. He was on record for the defense from very early on. Went into these tests a few days after the incident took place.
He's one of the best qualified ballistics experts in the country. However, we have to ask ourselves the question, what relevance is this ballistics evidence? Because the state-led ballistic evidence, Captain Mangena was very good, but in my view it wasn't central to the case. The facts of the case are very simple. We have 4 bullet holes in the door, we have a dead woman behind the door, and we have a person who admits that he fired the fatal shots. The sequence of the shots, the angle at which they were fired, it's interesting, but in my view it doesn't prove the guilt or innocence of the accused. It
For
doesn't
the premeditated murder
It doesn't
charge.
prove his state of mind, and all the prosecution has to do is prove Pistorius' state of mind. Did he intend that it happened? Did he intend that it happened in circumstances that were not legally justifiable? So, as interesting as the ballistic evidence has been, particularly Captain Mangena, it's not going to really take the matter much further.
What about the screams, this rapid fire and rapid succession? Is there much difference between that in ballistic
No.
worlds?
No, because what we're talking about again is not so much the sequence of events and what happened before or what happened afterwards, but what was Pistorius' state of mind at the time that it happened. And what Gerrie Nel did was he had to present a circumstantial case because there was only one witness there, and that's Oscar Pistorius. He had to present a circumstantial case. He had to get Pistorius to give evidence, and he banked on the fact that when Pistorius gave evidence, Pistorius would give or make concessions that would be in the state's favor. And Pistorius made 2 very important concessions. Number 1, could you have walked away from the situation? Yes, I could have. Number 2, why did you go down the hall? I went down the hall because I made a conscious decision to do that. That is, in essence, intent. So all of this other expert evidence, to a great extent, in my view, is irrelevant.
So that's why I think the forensic psychiatrist will probably be their wow witness, because he or she will talk about state of mind and his intentions, because this is not a whodunit, it's a why did he do it.
If they are going to produce a wow witness, they better do it soon, because they should have done it already.
Mr. Wolmarans continues his evidence tomorrow and no doubt will be carefully cross-examined by the state prosecutor, Gerrie Nel. Remember, you can watch continuing coverage of the Pistorius trial on Sky News and a special catch-up programme at 9:30 every night.